So devastating to see how incompetent our city is.
America, this is absolutely insane. Gavin Newsom just signaled his 2028 presidential run while Pacific Palisades fire victims are still living in hotels because not one single home has been rebuilt in 11 months. We're talking about a governor whose policies literally caused the fires by protecting endangered weeds over human safety, then created a bureaucratic nightmare that's prevented any meaningful reconstruction. And now, get this, California is facing an $18 billion budget deficit that is $5 billion worse than Gavin Newsom originally projected. But somehow this disaster of a governor thinks he's qualified to run the entire United States. 0 homes rebuilt, billions in deficits, and he wants to be promoted to the White House.
It's interesting. I've been on a journey like most people, feeling great, feeling stressed, feeling doubtful. The last 2 days, I don't know what it is. I think it's maybe the dust settling after Madison Square Garden.
What is up, guys? TYSON DELACRUZ here. Thank you so much for rocking with me. This is the most delusional political move that I've ever seen. Running for president while your state burns and your budget collapses. Let me start with the smoking gun that proves Newsom's environmental extremists directly caused the most destructive fires in California history.
California State Parks wildfire mitigation team reportedly instructed officials to let the Topanga State Park, quote, burn in a wildfire event in order to restore the natural ecosystem. The document was reportedly issued just weeks before the January 7th wildfire and could have prevented local firefighters from fully extinguishing an earlier blaze.
And they specifically said to keep this information secret to the public. This is criminal negligence disguised as environmental policy.
The protection of the brushweed, like this plant called the milk vetch plant, is actually protected. So they're not supposed to remove this. And they're finding that that brush helped burn and spread these fires faster.
While President Trump was telling California for years to clear out the brush, Newsom's environmental extremists were protecting a weed called milk vetch, whatever that is, that actually helped the fires burn and spread faster. They prioritized an endangered plant and some fish over human life and property. Newsom's policies didn't just fail to prevent the fires, they actively contribute to making them worse. Now let's talk about what happened after Newsom's policies caused the fires, because this shows his complete incompetence at basic government functions.
Here we are over 10 months later. How many homes in the area have been rebuilt, and have you been able to get a permit to rebuild your home?
So I would say I've driven around the neighborhood a few times, and there's not one single home built 100%.
11 months, you guys. 11 freaking months after the fires destroyed 7,000 buildings. Not one single home has been completely rebuilt. Not one. This is a complete failure of government leadership that should disqualify anybody from higher office.
President Trump came out right after the fires and basically put his finger in her chest and said, hey, get these permits through fast. And she's all talk and no action.
Nothing, absolutely nothing has changed. The same bureaucratic hoops, the same delays, no additional staffing, pure government incompetence.
Palisades fire victims were in tears as the council delayed a vote to waive construction fees almost 11 months after that deadly fire.
Almost a year freaking later, these people lost everything, and Newsom's government is still nickel and diming them for permits.
Both reports will have a major fiscal impact.
Council members now weighing 2 possible plans, one costing the city an estimated $86 million, waiving fees for single-family home rebuilds.
The city council is debating between an $86 million fee waiver and a $280 million proposal while wildfire victims live in hotels. This is the kind of bureaucratic paralysis that defines Newsom's California. Endless meetings, no action, and no results. Now, let me tell you about the real human cost of Newsom's failed leadership, because these aren't just statistics. These are American families whose lives have been destroyed by government incompetence.
People moved out of state. They moved to Texas. They moved to Montana. They moved to Tennessee. They're done with California. because of the mismanagement.
This is a direct result of Newsom's mismanagement before, during, and after the fires.
We did not ask for this fire. We just want to rebuild. We're not looking for anything fancy. We're looking for the city to stand up and do their part.
Guys, this is absolutely heartbreaking. American citizens begging their government to do their basic job to help them rebuild after a disaster. One fire survivor said he's hesitant to rebuild because nobody on his street is rebuilding. Even if he rebuilds, he'll be living in a fire zone with no neighbors because Newsom's government has made the process so impossible that entire communities are just giving up. This is what happens when you have a governor who is more interested in presidential policies than actually governing. While Gavin Newsom is planning campaign strategies, fire victims are living in hotels and temporary housing with no end in sight. While Newsom is dreaming about the White House, his state is facing a massive budget deficit that perfectly illustrates his fiscal incompetence.
And California is facing a major budget deficit next year. The California Legislative Analyst Office is predicting a budget shortfall of almost $18 billion.
This is nothing new for California, but California is facing an $18 billion budget deficit next year. That is $5 billion worse than what Newsom initially projected. This is what happens when you have a governor who cannot do basic math or manage a budget.
July through October, our revenues are running roughly $6 billion ahead of where we projected we were going to be when the Budget Act was passed.
Revenues will not make up for how much the state is spending.
Unfortunately, state spending is also growing commensurately, but also that doesn't address the long-term structural imbalance between revenues and expenditures.
The state has a long-term structure and balance between revenues and expenditures, which is bureaucratic speak for we spend more money than we have every single year. This is the fiscal management record Newsom wants to bring to the federal government. I want you guys to imagine, just imagine what he would do with the national debt with this kind of reckless spending mentality. California has the highest taxes in the nation and still can't balance its budget. That's Newsom's motto. He wants to export to America. Let me connect the dots for you because the timing of Newsom's presidential announcement couldn't even be more tone deaf. California is simultaneously dealing with the aftermath of one of the most destructive fires in the state's history and facing the largest deficit in recent memory. Fire victims can't rebuild their homes and the state can't balance its books. This is the perfect storm of government failure. But instead of focusing on solving these crises, Newsom is positioning himself for a 2028 presidential run. He's literally campaigning for a promotion while his current job performance is an unmitigated disaster. The fire rebuild failure shows he can't manage basic government services. The budget deficit shows that he can't handle fiscal responsibility. The combination of this shows he's completely unqualified for higher office.
We need to take a hard look at programs that were established, particularly in those years when we had surpluses, to assess whether they're accomplishing what was intended to accomplish when they were set up. And also, importantly, their sustainability.
This is classic progressive governance. Expand government during good times, then face fiscal crisis when it hits reality. Newsom created this mess by expanding government programs without considering long-term costs. Now he wants to do the same thing to the federal government, creating unsustainable programs that future generations will unfortunately have to pay for. So let me ask the obvious question. How can someone with Gavin Newsom's record of catastrophic failures possibly think that they're qualified to be president? This is a man whose environmental policies directly contributed to the most destructive fires in California history. His bureaucratic incompetence has prevented a single home from being built in 11 months. His fiscal irresponsibility created an $18 billion deficit despite record tax revenue. But in the delusional world of progressive politics, failure is apparently a qualification for higher office. Newsom looks at this disaster he created in California and thinks, This is exactly what America needs. The timing of his presidential positioning is particularly insulting to fire victims who were still living in hotels while he's planning campaign strategies. They can't rebuild their homes, but he's already building his political future. This shows the fundamental problem with career politicians like Gavin Hairgel Newsom. They're more interested in their next job than doing their current job well. Truth be told, the scary part of all this is probably millions of Democrats will support his campaign despite his obvious failures. They'll ignore the fires, the rebuild disaster, and the budget crisis because he fits all the right boxes.
You think for a second I have 24 Trump 2028 hats. His folks keep sending me.
We do a little trolling. It's called We Do a Little Trolling.
America, Gavin Newsom's presidential ambitions while California burns and his budget collapses is the most tone-deaf political move in recent memory. Not one home rebuilt in 11 months, an $18 billion budget deficit that's $5 billion worse than projected, fire victims living in hotels while bureaucrats debate permit fees. This is his record of quote-unquote success that supposedly qualifies him for the White House. His environmental extremism caused preventable fires by protecting weeds over human safety. His bureaucratic incompetence prevented meaningful reconstruction. His fiscal irresponsibility created massive deficits despite the highest taxes in America. The fact that fire victims are permanently leaving California for other states just reaffirms his leadership. When people vote with their feet and abandon your state after a disaster, that is not a qualification for higher office. That is a disqualification. We can't let somebody who can't rebuild homes or balance budget get anywhere near the White House. California's failure under Newsom should be a warning to America, not a preview of our future under his presidency. 0 homes rebuilt, $18 billion deficit, presidential dreams. This is the delusional arrogance of progressive politics in one perfect package. Let me know what you think about this. Drop it down in the comment section down below. Smash the like button if you kindly would. Share, subscribe, and as always, guys, I'll catch you on the next one.